Okay, Chapter 1. Can you start a pottery studio with €500? Let me save you a bit of time here. If you come to me with €500 and say, I want to set up a pottery studio, my first instinct, obviously, is to say, not in the way you would imagine. By the time you've priced a kiln, a wheel, a few decent tools, and somewhere to put it all, that budget has disappeared before you've even had a cup of tea. But that doesn't mean you can't start. It just means you need to start differently. The mistake most people make at the beginning is thinking they need a full studio before they begin. You absolutely don't. What you do need is a way of making. The studio comes later, piece by piece, usually built out of whatever you can get your hands on at the time. Kilns can be borrowed. That's worth saying again, because it removes one of the biggest barriers straight away. If you know another local potter, a teacher, or even a small studio, there's often a way to get work fired without owning a kiln yourself. If you're particularly determined, you can build your own kiln. A wood-fired one if you've got the space, gas if you've got the knowledge. But that's not where I'd start, unless you already know what you're doing. What I would start with is a table, a proper one. If you've got a garage or a shed and a bit of determination, your first job is to create a solid working surface. Not something that wobbles every time you lean on it, but something that feels like it belongs there. You can pick up old tables second-hand if you're lucky, but more often than not, you're better off building one yourself or getting someone local to do it for you. A sheet of plywood and some sturdy timber will take you a long way. And it doesn't need to be beautiful. It just needs to be reliable. And make it as big as your space sensibly allows. You'll grow into it far quicker than you think. Once you've got somewhere to work, you'll start to realize that making is only part of the equation. The rest of it is managing everything that goes with it. Clay, water, tools, half-finished pieces, finished pieces, things you're not quite sure about, yet you're not ready to throw them away yet. This is where buckets and shelves quietly become some of the most important things in your studio. You'll need more buckets than seems reasonable. Buckets for water, buckets for reclaiming clay, buckets for moving things around, and probably a few that you don't remember buying but end up using anyway. They don't need to match, and in truth, it's better if they don't. There's something about a slightly mismatched setup that feels more like a working studio than something straight out of a catalogue. Shelving is the same story. You can spend a fortune on it, or you can pick it up second-hand from a car boot sale or a reclamation yard and have something far more interesting. At this stage, function matters way more than appearance. Now, water is another thing that seems simple until it isn't. Getting water into your space is usually straightforward. However, getting it out again without causing problems takes a bit more thought. Clay and drains are really not good friends. If you're washing tools or hands regularly, you need some way of stopping clay from going straight into your pipes. A clay trap is the usual solution, something that allows the clay to settle before the water carries on its way. It's not complicated, but it is essential if you don't want problems later on. Then there's storage. For your clay itself, Clay has a habit of drying out at exactly the wrong moment if you let it. Keep it sealed, keep it out of direct heat, and give it a proper container. A simple plastic box will do, or an old toolbox. That'll do the job perfectly well. At this point, you've got enough to begin. Not a perfect studio, not a finished space, but something far more useful. A place where work can actually happen. And that's the real point of all this now, isn't it? You're not trying to build your ideal studio on day one. You're trying to remove the excuses that stop you starting. Once you begin, the rest of it tends to follow. The table gets better, the shelves get fuller, the systems improve, and before long you look around and realise you've built something that actually works. But it all starts much smaller than people expect. And that's no bad thing, really.